commentary on that, but okay, so I will talk to you very briefly about our guest presenters today. Sorry, I'll just bring up their bios. We have two presenters today, Dr. Clare Power, who's currently a lecturer in teacher performance assessment and work integrated learning coordinator in the School of, sorry, I've lost my, oh God, I beg your pardon. I'm recording all of this. This is wonderful. I'm back. Clare has implemented and led a range of university-wide academic literacy and learning initiatives, including peer learning programs and subjects, as well as maintaining a focus on sustainability education. Clare's passion for and expertise in peer learning and communities of practice was realised through her coordination of the Peer Assisted Study Sessions program and the subject experiential learning in communities while at Western Sydney University. Our other presenter is Dr. Evelyn Hibbert, an adult educator with an EDD from the University of New England. She has worked in many contexts, from illiterate Roma in Eastern Europe to supervising doctoral candidates in different universities in Australia and the USA. Evelyn worked for some years as an academic literacy and learning advisor at Western Sydney University. She now has multiple casual and voluntary teaching, research and leadership roles in different institutions and organisations. Evelyn's committed to developing learning in and through community, proactively valuing what each person brings to that context. And Evelyn and Clare today are talking to us today about the development and implementation of transitional and peer mentoring programs in all contexts. And at that point, I will hand over to May, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what today's session looks like.
Yes, thank you. First of all, am I sharing the presentation in presentation mode? Fantastic. So hello again, everyone, and welcome to the session. Before we begin, I'd just like to thank Clare and Evelyn again for agreeing to be today's host authors. The article that Clare and Evelyn have written focuses on supporting student transition to university and students' engagement with the expectations of academia. It's a topic that is of high relevance to all of us. The outline of today's session looks like this. So we're going to first start with a breakout room activity, and then that's going to be followed by a short presentation by the authors. After that, we'll have a second breakout activity where you'll be mixed around, and we'll end the session with your questions to the authors. So the first breakout room activity is going to be a discussion of a concept or an idea that you have found interesting in the article and why you have found that interesting. In order to find out what each group is discussing, could I please ask that we share our discussions, our ideas on this Padlet, and I'll put the link in the chat as well. You could just put the idea or the concept that you found interesting, just so that we have a general idea of what are the things that we've picked up in the article. I'm just going to put that link into the chat. Where is it? Into the chat, which is, oh my goodness. Hang on, I can't put it in the chat because I can't see my chat. Let me just minimize all of these. And okay, that's weird. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. It's on a different screen. There we go. There's also a QR code. You can do that on your phone. So Steve, if you don't mind putting people into breakout rooms, we've got 15 minutes for this first activity.
Done.
Excellent.
The rooms are now open.
Clare and Evelyn, with this first one, Do you want to go in or do you want to stay out? I assumed you might want to stay out, but
Yeah, I guess.
Recording started. Over to you, May.
Everybody back there. Yeah, lovely. Well, welcome back, everyone. As we can see on the Padlet wall, lots of interesting ideas. I'll give you some time to just read through what others have posted if you haven't already done so. But one of the main themes emerging is the idea of becoming a first-year student, becoming an apprentice academic, becoming as a process, the concept of a toolkit, that learning academic expectations or fitting and adapting to those doesn't mean you forsake your previous culture. And that's an interesting one, because oftentimes there'll be conversations, maybe not explicitly in this way, but of like, this is how we do it. You're at university, you're in Australia, you know, forget the other ways. This is the true way. Those problematic talks. What students bring are strengths, student strengths rather than deficit models of thinking. So we're going to touch on these, and there are one or two about areas that people would like to know more about. So let me just stop sharing, stop share, and I'll go back to the presentation, which is here. Okay. So now I'd like to hand over to Claire and Evelyn, who will be sharing their experiences of student-facilitated transition pre-publication of the article and post-publication of the article. So Claire and Evelyn, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting us. We both found it really encouraging to know not just that this article is being read again, but also that people found the ideas interesting, because that's what prompted us to write in the first place. So Claire and I have gone through the questions and allocated them. So I have the first two. So how did we end up working on the project or this unit? In the uni we were in, Western Sydney Uni, it shut down their student learning unit and decided to disperse the learning advisors into faculties, or whatever they were called at the time, schools, I think. And so Claire ended up in education and was told she was doing the unit. And I came through another route because I had helped with the research project that prompted the start of the unit, working with the refugee students on campus. And I also had an adult learning background, so I was aware of communities practice type stuff. So what were our initial experiences? Well, when we inherited the unit, it was in the red in terms of student feedback, as in terrible student feedback. It was a very complex unit. It wasn't being well managed at that time, and the students did not like the chaos and confusion and other things that were happening. Claire and I spent hours, literally hours, trying to, especially for Claire, to get her mind around what this unit involved, because of all the configurations, mentee to mentor, small group learning, facilitators, everything. It was very complex. And also Claire, from her peer mentoring background, wanted to put in more support for mentoring, because you can't expect students just to mentor without knowing how to mentor. And also specific, if they're going to help with academic literacy, they needed to have some idea of how to do that. So initially, as we started that, we found that it took the students a long time to adjust to this different way of learning. I would say it took them about 6 weeks when they started, because our education system trains for competition, not collaboration. And so students found that more organic, interactive way of learning, supportive, very difficult. So it tended to be very chaotic at the beginning, and students needed a lot of reassurance that it was okay, that, you know, after 6 weeks they would adjust and they'd be happy. By the middle of the unit, they were enjoying that they had friends at university, we found. By the end of the unit, the end of the semester, they thought that every single first year on campus should do the unit. So over to Claire, what prompted the write-up?
Thanks, and thank you, everyone. So we felt it was a unique subject that gave students the opportunity to develop their agency once we understood the potential of the subject, the potential that we actually had in the ways that Evelyn's described. And we would meet with the facilitators each week, and we realised that the learnings and connections that they shared with their students and their own unique facilitation approaches weren't replicated in any of the other peer mentoring programs at the uni. So I'd run past for a long time. And so this was a shift into a 4-credit subject. And we could see in our meetings with them their identities strengthening, and that their experiences and the forms of capital they brought was being recognised, and they were being empowered through the process. And we worked with them as co-problem solvers and innovators. And so it was a really dynamic process. And quite a lot of the students had moved from mentee to mentor to facilitator as well. So we had this really nice sort of generational contribution to the program. So it was interesting when Evelyn and I met to talk about this. And we were recapping the experience. I was slightly in awe of everything we got our head around and actually managed to develop, because it did become a really popular subject. And I think that was partly the strengths that we brought from our previous experiences, but hugely because of the input of the students. And I just found a quote I like to give the student voice. And I found, so students, one of the assessments was an essay they had to write, a reflective essay. This was in the first semester after we'd taken it on. And the student wrote, "The unit is undoubtedly seeking to improve, which I believe is obtainable, seeing as though they were acknowledging the initial downfalls and the criticisms of students undertaking the unit. To be provided with the opportunity to mentor a first-year student was rewarding for everyone involved, and I believe I've become a better person as a result." Then they go on to say, the way we were responding to evaluations demonstrates that the course educators are on the right path to meeting the limitless potential the unit truly holds. And this student had spoken about the opportunity to speak frankly without fearing penalty in their assessment task. So that was heartening. And what was successful really is just what I was saying. I think it was the collaboration that we evaluated, we sought feedback, we worked together, and yeah, that's enough for that section. Over to you, Evelyn.
So on to the next slide, May. So what's happened to the program since 2016? What can I say? It's Australian universities. So it was arbitrarily dropped. I can't tell you the exact year. It was dropped because it was run by a casual, me, by that stage, and there were competing demands for other subjects in the curriculum. There was no concern about high student feedback or its role in aiding transition. And even though the original researchers and the refugee students attempted to appeal, there was no interest at all. So that's a bit of a sad end. But anyway, okay, Claire, over to you for how we continue.
It was a really sad tale. So I was restructured out of Western Sydney and moved to Charleston, where I was in the School of Teacher Education, not in peer mentoring. And I'm reflecting on this question. I just thought I learned so much in my time in peer mentoring about being a facilitator as a teacher. And so that's the main way that I continue to work with peer mentoring. And I'm also an associate editor on the Journal of Peer Learning. And I just had the privilege of examining a thesis on peer education for adolescent girls in Kurdistan, Iraq, in refugee camps. So to have read that thesis and looked at the literature and the potential in so many places of peer learning was really heartening. And why is critical pedagogy and whiteness theory important to you? Well, for me, critical pedagogy is the juice of education. It's what deepens and broadens education and offers possibilities rather than limiting. It contributes to creating a socially just and ecologically aware world. It means that we don't just introduce peer learning programs, but we think about our context, our particular students' needs, and we challenge them. And as Christy says in the paper, we watch our tendency for uncritical acceptance of issues of power and control within the institutions and the programs that we run. Evelyn?
So, well, I'm not involved in peer mentoring, and although I've tried to establish transitional programs in other institutions, I have had not any success. I'm basically a learning community person, and I continually try to overcome the competitiveness that works against collaborative learning in higher education. I've had minimal success in the unis and institutions, but I did quite well at setting up informal networks, including helping majority world academics to cross this cultural broker idea of peer mentoring them or mentoring them as they try to attain publication in Western academic journals. So I remain concerned that we're not doing so well with creating belonging and to to enable apprenticing academics, I guess is how I would see it, rather than just teaching students. And as I mainly work in the theological education sector at the moment, there's just virtually nothing that I'm encountering. And this is where we come to whiteness theory and critical pedagogy, just that understanding that the invisibility of privilege and the invisibility of the effect of background, and how that means that those who are in control of the institutions just don't see how much their position relates to their background, and how we need cultural brokers to enable success in institutional context. So yeah, I'm still concerned about the need to help people trying to come into this space, this very white space, still to appreciate that they don't have to give up who they are in order to be successful in it. And that's on the international stage as well. I think that's us, May.
Oh, lovely. Oh, thank you. So much to think about. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Evelyn. Now, we have come up with some questions for you to discuss in your breakout rooms. Feel free to discuss. There are 6 questions there. Any of these, all of these, or other questions, other topics, anything that will guide your discussions. I'm going to pop these into the chat as well right now. Yes, I think I've got all of them there. And while you're having your conversations in your breakout rooms, can you also make notes of some questions that you'd like to ask Claire and Evelyn? And when we come back, we'll have some time for question and answer. So just make a note of that as well. I think we've got about 25 minutes for the breakout room conversations. Steve, if you would like to open up the rooms.
May, I'll hand it over to you to coordinate the final section of the afternoon.
Yes. So I've just stopped the share, I believe, because we're open. Claire and Evelyn now are open to questions, but it doesn't have to be question answer. We can discuss certain topics that you'd like to, or if you'd like to bring in your experience and share with us what you would like to bring to the topic, that's also perfectly fine. Yes, yeah, our conversation got cut short as well. Lisa, if you want to, yeah, maybe, yeah, anyway, I'll reach out to Lisa in a bit. So questions or comments, if you want to just put your hand up, the hand emoji. Julia already has her hand up. I can't see everybody at the moment, but I think it already pops up. Or you could just put it in the chat as well. Julia, shall we start with you?
Sorry, I don't believe I do have my hand up.
Oh, okay, sorry. Maybe it was someone else who had their hand up in that area. Okay, well.
I can't believe in a room of academic advisors, no one has a question. Anna, come on, you're always good for a question.
I'm afraid I'll start talking and never finish. Oh, hands up.
Here we go. Jane and Joyce.
Okay. Yep. Okay, Jane.
Oh, I'm off mute already. I'll
Okay.
The conversation we were having in our room, we were talking about democratizing that classroom space and how our experiences of that have really unsettled students and until they sort of develop some comfort with it. But being empowered in the classroom is a new experience, I think, for many students. And I was wanting to know from Clare and Evelyn, but you mentioned in your experience is that 6 weeks of real unsettled, this sort of unsettled period, and then students sort of get on with it. I'm interested to know those I suppose the tipping point. And some of the experiences that you might have provided them with to settle them into a more kind of democratic way of working with each other.
I think that part of the unsettledness at the beginning was because we had to pair them up as mentee-mentor. One, it took some time to find the pairs, and then we had to help a lot of students. They just were not comfortable talking with strangers. So we actually had to do some communication training to help them to even know how to contact or talk to a stranger. And then it just took time for them to meet maybe a couple of times to start developing a friendship. But at the same time in the unit, we then started their small groups, where again, that was relationship building, and that was entirely in the student hands. We didn't participate in those groups or oversee them at all. And also, so they were facilitated by third years, who we also had to help. Some of them were practicum students, and some of them had been in the unit previously. So those who had previous experience were great help in helping the others to learn how it all worked. So it just, apart from the specific training in how to talk to each other, how to relate, how to build relationships, and constant reassurance that, this unsettled feeling is normal. It's part of what this is about, and it's a different way of learning, and it will take time, and you won't be penalized in any way because of it. Because we also had assessments where we gave continual feedback on the same type of assessment every week, and that so they were also learning that they can improve through feedback, which was radical for some of them as well. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but hopefully.
Oh, I might jump in there. Sorry, I think my
Sorry,
that
I was
okay?
on mute talking to myself, but yes, Joyce.
Yeah.
And I just told you on mute when I was on mute.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Caroline's actually raised in the chat one of the questions that came up in our group, which was, why was it hard to get people who wanted to be mentored? And the other question one of the other questions was about sustainability of the unit. How do we create a program or a subject like that is sustainable, that's not just going to drop off, but yeah, maybe if you could address the first one, why was it hard to get people who wanted to be mentored, do you think? And is that to do with the whole transition to university experience?
Go ahead, Claire.
Your memory's better than mine. I have this memory of the students, particularly when we started the unit, they had flyers and they'd be in the sort of cafe mingling area of the campus, handing out flyers, cajoling students, offering the opportunity to have a one-on-one experience with a mentee and as a mentee. And I think the students as well found it surprising that other students were unwilling to take up this opportunity. And I think we tried lots of methods, didn't we? We'd go into lectures and encourage students to attend. No, what's your memory of why it was so difficult?
The primary problem was this thing I talked about, the stranger, fear of strangers, and fear of, so you're in an academic environment, so they're also afraid of other people judging them. So we went into lots of other first year units in other schools and tried to, so we had some academic tutors of large first year units giving us a platform in those units. But when we talked to those students afterwards, they just said they don't know the people, they're too afraid. So without the university or the schools pushing the unit as being part of their learning, it was just too big a barrier to overcome without prior relational contact.
We also talked about how a lot of relationships at university are, and Alice was talking about the American context as well. A lot of the relationships are formed outside of the actual subjects that people are studying. And so it's sort of unusual to have the mentoring relationship formalized in a credit-bearing subject. And yeah, so to try to foster those relationships in that context maybe is also difficult. But I was also wondering if it's to do with the language of, do people understand or know what that mentor-mentee relationship is as well?
We use the terminology of buddies in the program as well for some time. And I think we played a bit with different terminologies. The subject was called experiential learning in communities, which students would often write as experimental learning in communities, and it was, which, it was great to have that opportunity to experiment. But it actually worked really well in the end, having the students within the subjects being mentees with then the other older students facilitating them, because they had the opportunity in the class to build relationships in what we felt we created as a safe environment where they could build trust with each other. And then we had readings to support that, and we sort of enlivened the readings through their experiences so they could see that the literature supported that, and they could contest the literature as well. Just in terms of sustainability, it's difficult, isn't it? Like often it's a champion, and when the champion goes or is moved on, the fantastic programs can slide. So somehow embedding these concepts that we find really important in the culture of the school or faculty seems to be the only way to sustain things.
Martin, did you have your hand up previously?
Yeah, I was just wondering to what extent you think there's been a change in this area during the last couple of years. And I think that, you know, students potentially have become a bit more detached from their sort of community at university, and they've had a more maybe pragmatic relationship, sort of completing their courses. And a lot of students are also working for considerable amounts of time during their studies. So I'm just wondering whether you feel that there's been this change or what the implications are. And secondly, maybe how many hours of commitment can we expect from, let's say, second year students, practically speaking, you know, and what would our priorities be within those hours? Sorry, that's a lot to ask. Anyway, those were kind of issues that came up in our discussion.
I think they're good questions for people who are currently running peer mentoring programs in the room.
Can I just say that at Western Sydney Uni, even when we were doing it, that most of our students were already working full time, and they were trying to squeeze academic progress into inadequate time as it was. And we did reduce the face-to-face time and the tutorial time in the unit to give them the extra hours. So the hours they have for mentoring counted in the, you know, the unit load. I can't comment. I'm not on students now. I'm not in that space.
We jump in from the perspective of the program I'm involved with. I've got
Yes.
peer mentors that are working about 4 to 8 hours a week with me as peer mentors, but I know most of them are also working part-time jobs and studying full-time. So as much as we try to monitor how much peer mentoring they're doing and work with us, they will also take on other jobs and study. So yeah.
I want to share, I was part of a peer mentoring program for HDR students before I completed my PhD within the School of Education at Flinders. And it was really good experience to be able to share the journey as a peers to other PhD students in a different level. So, and then you have that connection that you can make with them, and you don't realize how much as a peers you can help the other peers to success in their journey. So yeah, it's quite a rewarding experience.
Good point. Shall we move on to Anna and Anna's question?
Thank you. It's a bit of a comment as well. I'm in the Faculty of Education, and I did lose a very successful peer mentoring program for simple reasons that had nothing to do with the success of the program. You know, the word funding was a bit of a bad word last year and the year before. So we now have a central program, and I just wanted to share, maybe it's something useful. It took me a while to chase the program coordinators. I don't know if any of them are here by any chance, but it's an opt-out program now. All first-year students in education are allocated a peer mentor from second, third, fourth year, and they can opt out. So they're in groups, and I have a feeling that the most vulnerable students may be the ones silently opting out. But the fact that it's promoted as everyone's got a mentor, I think it's probably one of the strategies that may work better. We find that opting out is better than opting in a lot of things that we do. So I think, yeah, I just wanted to share that, and also tell people not to feel disheartened, because I was very angry with my university for half a year. I could not believe that they could do this to me and to the students. I think bad things happen. And then, yeah, I'm now trying to find a way to work with the central peer mentoring program to see if they can do some of the things that my peer mentors were doing, because they were wonderful. Yeah, just a comment. Thank you. Oh, sorry. And Kate asked about readings. I also wanted to ask the paper authors, do you have like your favorite academic article of all times, proving that peer mentoring is one of the best things to happen to us since sliced bread? Thank you.
I love the question.
I put the topics in response to Kate in the chat. Our readings are quite old now, looking at them.
Anyone else?
Anyone else who
maybe,
wants to jump in?
Yeah, because we now need to prove everything we want to do or are doing. So
We need to prove that things that were successful, and we should continue to do those.
The Journal of Peer Learning has a lot of evaluative articles, which would be worth looking at, certainly with strong supportive data and taking a lot of different angles on the way you can evaluate peer mentoring programs. So that would be worth looking at. New edition coming out in the next few weeks.
Great. Excellent. Okay. And I know Siri had a question or a comment.
Thanks. I think I've figured it out now. But just to confirm, so this particular unit that you were running sounds absolutely fantastic. At experiential learning in communities. So it was a cross-level unit, is that right? So you could be a first year, second year, third year student to be in that unit, is that right?
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Okay, so the first year ones would presumably probably be wanting a mentor, and the second or third years would be in a mentoring role for first years. Is that right?
Yeah, so the first years were mentees.
Yeah.
And third years were pretty much always mentors. And then second years were kind of a mix. And at some stage when we ran out of first years, then the second years were peer mentoring, like equal mentoring.
Mentoring each other.
Buddies, yeah.
I should add that we also had the Masters of Teaching students doing it for credit as part of the kind of community practicum as well.
So they were in mentoring roles?
They were the facilitators of the groups, where the mentors were debriefed and trained.
And then you involved mentees from outside the unit as well, if you didn't have enough mentees?
We tried to recruit mentees from outside the unit, and in the earlier years there were some, but towards the end of the life of the unit, we were finding it more and more difficult. So initially the refugee students in the original research project were recruiting new refugees and friends to be mentees, but I guess they started graduating and there wasn't a new fresh cohort in there. So apart from students who had been in the unit recruiting new first years, we would run out of first years basically.
But they didn't, so the volunteer mentees, did they have to attend all the sessions and things?
No, so if they weren't enrolled in the unit, they didn't attend, obviously they didn't attend tutorials, and they didn't have to attend debriefing groups, but they were invited to if they would like to, and they were certainly invited to any social activities in the unit.
Cool. That's so interesting.
Brendan has a question in the chat. Sorry, Brendan's got an interesting question in the chat. How did adding credit change the dynamics of the program?
It was for credit the whole time, is the way it was conceptualized, is my understanding. Evelyn, is that?
Yeah, that's
you were there
right.
at the very beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
So apart from the volunteer mentees, they didn't get it for credit, but they could if they were in an eligible school.
Okay.
We're coming up to 6 to 5. If there are any more comments or questions, now's the time. Yeah. Okay. Can I just firstly thank you, Claire and Evelyn, for coming in to speak to us and share your thoughts on a great article and a great program.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Virtual or real clap for them, and also for May for facilitating the session.
Thank you.
As one of the committee members. Our next session will be, I think it's August, haven't got an exact date for you yet, but we're having another couple of sessions before we are attempting to organise a sort of a minor symposium towards the end of the year where we spend a half day together, which I hope hopefully we'll have some more information to you about fairly soon. I am just about to pop a, oh no, oh, damn it, sorry, it's the wrong thing. Gee, don't you hate it when people commentate what they're doing in Zoom, which is what I tell students not to do and what I'm doing right now. It's an evaluation link in the chat. If you wouldn't mind just popping your responses down to a couple of those questions there, including what you might like to see in future iterations of this, because if we don't get ideas from you guys, we have to keep thinking of these things ourselves. So again, thank you very much for coming along. These things don't function unless people come along to them. So it's great that we do see people coming and supporting this. See if you can bring colleagues in. I think it's a bit of a more the merrier type thing, and we get a nice, you know, group feel, and we're working with people across states, and I think it's great to sort of do this sort of thing and keep in touch. It's something I think Zoom has been very good for, this regular meeting up of people across the country. So thank you. That's it from us. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you at the next one.
Yes. Bye.
May, Alice, do you want to hang around?
Yep.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.
And yeah, Steve, you look different.
I look different
You
because
look
I'm
really good. Yeah.
I've put on a beard for the day.
Well, it will keep you warm in our warm city. So yeah.
It's at the urgings of my sons. I've grown a beard.
No, it was lovely to see you know, some old faces. Beautiful. Okay.
Yes.
Not old meaning old, you know what I mean. Okay.
No, we know what you mean. That's know what you
Some of
mean.
us are older than others.
All good,
Thank
all
you.
good.
And yeah, I
Thank
hope
you.
we'll fix our
Well, I'll stop
you know,
recording.
countries